Hello, everyone. I have a quick case today that I thought would be interesting to look through, and I want to talk about why I think imaging is so important for the treatment planning of a case. So, this is the case that was sent over to me. You can see on this tooth, so it's sent over for tooth number three. And what we're looking at here is really deep decay. And so you can see how the general dentist would look at this and say, okay, it's deep, but I think it's savable. We can go, it's definitely into the nerve. We got this going on right here. Not the best looking tooth. Not necessarily sure what this is here. You can see that there's a defect here, and we're missing the tooth next to it. We can also look and see that on tooth number one, we got gross decay, not looking great. When we switch to the cone beam, though, it tells kind of a different story here. And this is why, first off, taking a cone beam on every patient is so stinking important, is because it gives you so much information. So, as we're scrolling through here, as you can see from the top, that decay is a lot worse than we initially thought. And look at just how deep that goes down into the pretty much furcation of the tooth, eats away at that tooth structure. You can see we have a little bit of perio disease on number two back here as well. Number one, no doubt, no surprise there, having an infection. And look at the defect here. Big old perio defect. Not necessarily sure if that's a vertical root fracture. We'll show you pictures here in a second. But large infection on these teeth goes up into the sinus. You can tell we got a lot of sinusitis and inflammation here. So, just from these two images so far, what we can tell is we have a large carious lesion extending into the pulp, pretty much almost into the furcation. And what I want you to do in your mind is think back to when you're in dental school, or if you were a general dentist watching this, prep this tooth for a crown. What's left? There's really not much left. And so you're going to be relying solely on the core material. And though our core material has gotten better and better, it's still not that good. And so that's where we start to run into some concerns before we even have met the patient. So let's go and look at what it looks like when we go inside the mouth. And surprisingly, it actually looked better than expected. So that's the photo that we took today. This was actually quite hard. And so the patient told me that he had a filling in here. It fell out a while ago. He has been, taking care of family. And so putting stuff off his side, totally don't, fault him for that. I'm recording, but there's the other team needs to grab something out of the room. So you'll hear some noises in the background, but that's okay. And so definitely big cavity there, but it was actually harder than I thought. So I went in initially expecting to tell him, yeah, no, you got to get this tooth extracted. But I wanted to have a conversation with him about it. And so what I wanted to show you here is how valuable the bite wing image is. Because when we look at this, this tells us quite a story. We're missing tooth number four. We have this gap here. I don't know why my drawing thing's not working because TDO wants to be. There we go. So we're missing this gap here. We're missing tooth number 31. 32 has dropped in sideways. 2 actually looks pretty darn solid. This obviously doesn't show the perio defect we saw on the cone beam, but 2 actually looks really good. And then you can see the extent of the decay kind of going down like we talked about, getting deep inside there. So we talked with him about it, and here's what we came up with as the plan. And so I'm going to show you the actual images that I drew on with the patient so you can have an idea of how we go through this process. So, what we started talking about, this huge mess right here, it makes a lot more sense when we go through the process. And so, what I initially talked about was how the root canal would work, where we drill a hole inside the tooth, get down there, clean to the bottom. I showed him the infection going on and the problems with it. Then I went through the cone beam and showed him how deep the decay was and how it was kind of a questionable tooth. And we went through and I, showed him the still image as well as the multiple images. Didn't even mention this because at this point it was clear he was cost sensitive and was ready to get the tooth taken out. And so when we go back to it, you can see I started to talk about the implant process with him. So there's my little crude drawing of the implant. Make sure you put the abutment in there so they know that it's two pieces. Make your general dentist lives easier. And then we went over to the bite wing. And this is where we came up with kind of the better idea. And this was working through I didn't come in with the idea of telling the patient this. We actually worked through this together as we talked about his wants and needs. And initially, they had talked about doing bridges here. And I told him, this is never going to be a bridge tooth. If anything, if you want to try and buy some time out of it, we could do a single crown on top of here if you get an implant here. And that got me thinking, well, why don't we do something else instead? This is obviously exaggerated. You would never do a crown that looks like this, but I'm not that great at mouse drawing, okay, you guys? And what we talked about doing was instead of doing two implants here, because he's missing the second molar down here, he's not going to go through ortho. So 32 is going to be extracted. One, which is hanging out over here, is also going to be extracted. And now we're going to be extracting 3. So that leaves us with 2 hanging out here. But really, is that great of a tooth? Do we need to go not everybody needs to have 28 teeth. And if you think about when we designed dentures, most people had first molar occlusion and they did great with that. And so in a case like this where he is cost sensitive and just wants to get some function back, this is actually a decent idea. So what we decided on doing was extracting tooth number 2 in addition to 1, 3, and 32 as well as the 2 on the other side at the same time, and then just do a single implant in the space of kind of 3, 4 between the two. This gives him time to heal and save, knowing that the implant's going to be costly. I can give him rough ideas with what an implant costs in our area. And for any specialists watching, it's a good idea to just talk to the periodontists and oral surgeons in your area. Give a rough idea. So, in our area, the placement of the screw portion of it, as this is how I explain it to the patient, is anywhere from about $2,000 to $3,000. The little post and crown on top of there is another 1,500 to two, just give or take. So you can be expecting to pay anywhere from 4 to 5 for the entire implant per tooth. Sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's lower, but you don't want to go in and quote like, "Oh, it's going to be $1,000 for the entire thing," and they're like, "What the heck?" And you also don't want to say it's going to be $10,000, and they say, "I'm never going to do that." Give them a range. Talk to your specialist. I always talk with mine and kind of get an idea. But what this does is this gives the patient a stable biting surface. It gives him function, and on somebody who's had a little bit of problem with decay, this gives him something that's not going to decay. So these are the actual images I showed to the patient. I've already messaged the dentist telling him what we want to do. He said that sounds great. And this is the benefit of doing the images. If it had just been, we just take this image and maybe an angled, like they taught you to do back before cone beams, cool. Well, maybe we can save this tooth. Maybe you'd catch that there was a deep probing here. But that doesn't tell the whole story. This tells a lot more of the story about what's going on, the deep level of decay. And the bite wing is by far the most useful one for treatment planning because they can see this. They can see their bite coming together and how this tooth number 2 isn't even being used. So why are we saving it when we can just take out all 4 of these teeth right here, replace it with one rock solid implant and get him back to healthy? So these are literally the images I showed to the patient just 5 minutes ago. I wanted to quick hop on and make this video because I think it's really important that the endodontists become a better team member for your interdisciplinary team when it comes to treatment planning. And stuff like this is going to make you seem a lot more valuable to your referring dentist. And it also makes the patients a lot happier because this spending the time with them and going through this process about your thought process and engaging them as well makes a huge difference in the long term. So thank you all so much for watching. If you have any comments, drop them below, and I'll see you all next time.